a former member of that intelligence committee as well as sitting in the intelligence committee. Give us your assessment of how big a risk Huawei participating with U.S. companies, both inbound and outbound, is to our national security. Forget trade for the moment.
There's no question that Huawei is an extension of the federal government, right? And that the Chinese government can come in and pressure Huawei to do anything that they want them to do. So they are a security risk. And when we look at supply chain security, this is one of those areas. But we also, while we should be promoting and talking to our allies about the problems of Huawei, we should also be making sure that U.S. 5G deployment is moving forward at pace, that we're working with allies and other companies that are competitors to Huawei, which is Samsung, Nokia, and there is a third one. I'm drawing like Samsung, Nokia, and Ericsson, there you go.
There you go.
And these three are the alternatives. And so we need to be making sure that we're incentivizing the deployment of 5G technology in our major cities and throughout our rural communities as well, so that American companies are the ones that take advantage of the infrastructure that 5G provides. Right now, Huawei has 30% of the global market.
So this is
and it's cheaper, right?
And this is a national security issue, as you say. At the same time, we do have, as you know well, these negotiations over trade going on with China. We just talked with a Brookings Institution expert in China who said it's going to be almost impossible to keep those separate. Do you think it is possible for this not to bleed over into trade and vice versa? That is to say, us do a deal with Huawei in order to get a bigger trade deal?
Well, I think all this stuff is interconnected. I think one thing we should also do right now is go ahead and put additional sanctions on ZTE. ZTE is the Chinese. They produce the handsets for telephone handsets, mobile phone handsets, and they were found to have violated a number of international sanctions. And we could have put a ban on allowing U.S. parts to be used in ZTE products for up to 7 years. This would have been a death blow to one of the largest and most profitable Chinese companies. I think we should rethink that and ultimately prevent that ban. Oh, and by the way, the ZTE uses U.S. manufactured, U.S. made chips in those phones. Guess what? This is playing hardball with the Chinese to make sure that they are doing and following proper rules. The Chinese are continuing to use cyber attacks to steal intellectual property, and they're investing in American companies and ultimately in order to buy them. We made changes recently in a process called CFIUS. This is reviewing technology that has a national security implication. Some of the recent changes, we've known the venture capital community has had to rethink whether they accept Chinese capital, because if they want to sell to the federal government, this was going to be impacted. I think the way, instead of getting into a tit for tat on tariffs with China, what we should do is something very simple. If an American company can't do it in China, then guess what? A Chinese company can't do it in America. If a U.S. investor can't do it in China, then a Chinese investor can't do it here in the United States. That doesn't require trade negotiations. That's something that we have the power in order to do in order to ensure China is behaving properly.
Congressman,
we can't do this alone.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to turn to a different trade agreement, which is the USMCA, which I know is important to you, the successor to NAFTA. You're from South Texas, down along that border there. We heard today reports that apparently the U.S. may be going to pull back on steel and aluminum tariffs with Canada and Mexico. Would this be part of an effort to get the USMCA going again? And if so, do you favor it?
Look, I've been saying for 3 years that putting steel and aluminum tariffs on our allies is not the smart thing to do. Those steel and aluminum tariffs are ultimately a tax on American consumers. We were seeing how they were impacting our agriculture industry, our ranching industry. It was potentially increasing the cost of buying vehicles and making homes. So removing those tariffs on our friends is a good thing in order to move negotiations. We have roughly about 30 days before Canada goes out of session to begin their election season. I'm seeing things move. We also need to make sure that Speaker Pelosi brings the USMCA to the floor so we can start whipping votes in order to get this done. The U.S., Mexico, and Canada, we build things together. About 14 million jobs are based on trade in the United States with those two countries. And we should be talking about how do we increase North American competitiveness in other parts of the world. One way to deal with China is make sure we have allies, and there's no better allies and neighbors than Canada and Mexico, where we can make sure that our economy, our North American economy, continues to dominate.
You put your finger on it. You're a Republican in the House, but the Democrats in the House, as I understand, are key to getting USMCA through the Congress.
Sure.
What's the likelihood that that can get done as you count the votes?
Well, if I'm counting the votes, I'm thinking we may need about 36 Democrats in order to vote for this. To give some context, in 2015 was the last time there was a vote here in the House dealing with trade, and that was to give President Obama the Trade Promotion Authority. That's the authority to negotiate a trade deal, bring it to Congress for an up or down vote. In that vote, a Republican House, Republican Senate, to give a Democratic president, President Obama, that victory, we only had 26 Democrats to do that. Now, the difference is there have been a lot of changes in labor and environment when it comes to USMCA. My Democratic friends for the last 3 months have been 3 years, have been talking about the importance of the relationship with Mexico. Right. So I'm hoping that we can get them to a yes, because this is something that creates jobs here in the United States of America.
Congressman, one more issue that affects the border down in South Texas, and that's immigration.
Sure.
We heard from the president his plan yesterday, and just as his plan for dealing with Huawei got bipartisan support, it appeared to get bipartisan opposition on the other hand. We had Lindsey Graham, for example, coming out against it. People are very disappointed from a lot of different directions. You know this issue well, and it's near and dear to your constituents. What do you make of the president's plan, and what should we be doing in immigration?
So I have 820 miles of the border with Mexico, more border than any other member of Congress. As you said at the top of the show, I spent a decade as undercover officer in the CIA. The plan that was announced yesterday was really only two pieces of the broader four-pronged immigration problem. What the president introduced yesterday was just border security and dealing with LPRs, legal permanent residents, how people can become U.S. citizens. And it didn't address DACA, it didn't address TPS, which is temporary protected status. It didn't address temporary or seasonal workers. It didn't address fixes in asylum. It's about a 500-page document, and there's the devil's in the details. I've been working on this issue. I think I have an idea of how we can get something passed in a very narrow way, and unfortunately it doesn't address the crisis that we're dealing with at the border right now. There's people abusing asylum laws. We need to fix that, but ultimately the way we deal with the crisis that we're having on our border right now is addressing the root causes in Central America, specifically the Northern Triangle. That's El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. We need to establish a special representative for the Northern Triangle, because this is not a problem for the U.S. or Mexico. It's a problem for the entire Western Hemisphere.